Good morning. This is Faith in Our Hometown, brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin. And now, here's your host, Father Jay Friedel.
Welcome back on another Sunday morning for another episode of Faith in Our Hometown, our weekly show where we discuss issues of faith and how they impact us as people here in the greater Joplin area. My guest this morning is Dr. Brad Hodson, who returns after being with us several weeks ago. This morning, Dr. Brad is the Executive Vice President for Missouri Southern. And Missouri Southern has an international mission that's been given it by the state, to train our young people in education on how to carry out that international mission. We're going to talk about how that impacts us as people of faith in the study of religion right after that. We're going to be back right after this Mercy Minute. Stay tuned.
The different bariatric surgical options here at Mercy Joplin includes laparoscopic Roux-en-Y gastric bypass, laparoscopic sleeve gastrectomy, and laparoscopic lap band placement. In addition, we also offer revisional laparoscopic surgeries for those patients that have had previous bariatric procedures but have had failures. The surgical procedure of choice will vary with different individuals, and so that's why our team will work with the patient on an individual basis to determine which procedure is the best fit for them. All three of the bariatric procedures that we offer here at Mercy Joplin have a long track record of proven safety and efficacy. The best procedure for the individual has to be a decision to be decided between the patient and the physician.
So welcome back, and again, thanks for joining us this morning for Faith in Our Hometown. Our guest this morning is Dr. Brad Hodson, who's the Executive Vice President for Missouri Southern State University. And so, Brad, welcome back.
Good morning.
It's nice to have you with us again. Southern has had this mission and has been charged with having an international mission. And not all of our viewers may know about that. So why don't you talk about that for a minute?
Well, the international mission began in 1994, so we're on our 27th year of focusing not exclusively, but every element of our education, our courses, our extracurricular activities should have an international component. And each year we choose a different country to focus on. We've pretty much hit a lot of them in the last 27 years. This semester was Great Britain, next semester is Korea. It's an opportunity for this part of the state that may not have a lot of exposure to international ideas, cultures, food, music, to be exposed to those ideas. We also bring in a lot of international students. Our students travel abroad, which is a broadening opportunity for everyone. Yeah. So it's just a way for us to take what is a great core education at Missouri Southern and give it a twist that is different for this part of the country.
Yeah, and I think it's essential because I think that there's a lot of misunderstanding out there about different cultures, and especially when it comes to religion. Right. Okay. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on this morning is to talk about this a little bit, because there is so much misunderstanding in the world today, and we see it in the culture all the time. I mean, you can't watch the news, you can't open the newspaper, and despite everybody's attempts to try to get it right when we start talking about religion, we get it wrong probably just as often as we get it right. Right. And that is of great concern to me as somebody who taught world religions at the college level. This issue is near and dear to my heart that we've got to increase people's understanding and their awareness. What can Missouri Southern do to help with that here in our region?
Well, you've traveled internationally, I'm sure. I've had the opportunity. You don't come back the same person. It's impossible to come back the same person. Right. And so the more that we expose our students to opportunities to travel abroad, the more we expose the campus community and the Joplin community to students coming in. For example, we have 28 students from Japan, and I've had an opportunity to spend some time with them. They're remarkable. Yeah. They're in many ways typical teenagers, but in other ways they're very diverse in their cultural views, their religious views, political, and we can learn a lot from them just by listening and interacting with them. So you never come away from an international experience the same way you went in.
Right. Well, and I remember we actually have one of the Japanese students who's not Catholic who comes to our Catholic campus ministry group and so comes to St. Peter's, for Mass, and it's just like, well, you just met some of the other students and wanted to come along, and it's great. I love it. He's a great kid. And I love visiting with him. But I mean, he never had any, he really didn't grow up with a lot of religion. Right. And of course I've asked him a little bit about, traditional, Japanese religion and some of those kinds of, but never, it's again a stereotype that everybody from that country practices this,
right.
And that's not the way it works. So I was asking him about Shinto, and and he's like, oh, my family never did, So, but then we got into even more indigenous practices, and they did some of that culturally, sure. Even if it wasn't faith observation, but just culturally, just kind of a general belief in ancestors and and how they're connected to them and those kinds of things.
Well, isn't that great that it was a learning opportunity for you?
Yeah.
You wanted to get to know the young man and talk to him and broaden your knowledge. He's not coming to the Catholic Church for a conversion experience.
Nope.
It may happen,
right?
But he's coming to learn as well, and that's what's great about higher education, is
exactly.
It's just a melting pot of learning. Everybody benefits, and that's one of the neat things about the International Mission.
And I do think it's great. So what could Southern what can Southern do to try to help our greater viewership? I mean, I know what we can do for some of the students.
Sure.
Okay, I know what we can do for some of the students who come to us. But what can we do for the larger community? How can we help, our regular viewership, or people who don't really go to Southern or,
right.
enrolled or anything? What can we do to help them?
Well, I think that anytime you have a university in your hometown, in your community, you have an opportunity to be immersed in a lot of different areas, whether that is history, music, food, culture, religion. And so again, every year we try to take a look at a different country in the world and look at their particular historic perspective, their cultural perspective, their religion. And so there is a catalog of options, a menu of options through the fall semester, where the community can come many times free of charge and listen to authors, lecturers, thought leaders in different aspects of that country come to the area and talk about what's different about that country and their perspective. That is certainly the primary way in which the community interacts with Missouri Southern through the International Mission. If you're not coming to the concerts, if you're not coming to the discussions about religion, so for example, during the Great British Semester, we had an author that came in and talked about the Anglican Church and the rise and the fall and the morphing of that over time. It was fascinating.
Sure.
So I think that there's always opportunity for the community to become involved. You don't have to enroll in a class. You don't have to make a financial or a long-term time commitment. Take an evening, come out to campus, listen to a lecturer, engage with the students, the faculty, and broaden your understanding of a different perspective than your own.
Yeah, and I think that that's pretty essential. I am going to push you on this one a little bit, because I'm always amazed that we don't have more courses in comparative religion, at least just as an opportunity for our students to take some kind of a survey. Now, I know in one semester, I mean,
it's hard.
Oh my Lord, trying to teach it was like, I just always told the students to be like, now get ready to drink out of the fire hydrant, because we're going to open it up and, and kind of like shove the whole thing, at you, once. And so you get 2 weeks for, 2 weeks for Christianity, 2 weeks for Judaism, 2 weeks for Islam, 2 weeks for Hinduism, 2 weeks for Buddhism, and then a bunch of the others get only a week.
Right.
Or a part of a
so
week.
So 2 weeks is 6 hours.
Yeah.
Put that in perspective. That's 6 hours of contact time to cover all the aspects of a major world religion. You're right. It doesn't do it justice.
It doesn't do it justice. But we're not. We're not. I mean, I don't know that we're doing our students justice really anyway, because we don't have that many courses. I mean, and I know, my previous university, was a larger place, about 3 times the students, okay? But we would offer 8, 10 sections of world religions every semester. And at Southern, we're lucky to get one every other semester.
Yeah.
So it's really kind of tricky.
Well, and I think it's important because religion is a facet of almost every conversation.
Yeah.
And so to have students that are well versed in the world's religions and understand what it means to be a Buddhist or what it means to be Jewish is placing them in a position to understand the world better. And so I agree with you completely.
Well, and I used to tell my students this, and when somebody tells you that they're Buddhist, you only know this much.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, you only know this much about them.
And probably half of what you know is inaccurate.
It's probably true, especially, and I said the same thing, and that's, and I say the same thing. So it tells you they're a Christian. Well, you know this much.
Right.
Or if somebody tells you they're Muslim, you know this much. And most of what you've got formed about that is because of what somebody said on TV about a radical, a way that some people have approached things, rather than the traditional way that most Muslims would approach life and faith.
Sure.
Well,
and that's one thing great about a university is you're working with faculty members that have dedicated themselves to the learning of a discipline. And so they're passing on knowledge, and certainly they have perspectives. Every faculty member, I teach a course, I teach it from my bent, but I have a background in that discipline. And so you're getting information from someone that has a depth of knowledge you're not going to find in some traditional sources of media.
Yeah. And again, you know, and I know media tries. I'm not,
Right.
you know, I'm not trying to bash them, but I'm just saying it's really hard. I knew how hard it was to try to, you know, do a survey of Buddhism in 2 weeks.
Well, so a
you know,
3-minute television
so try my
story.
3-minute television
Yeah,
story,
exactly.
right? Or, you know, a news piece where, you know, anything short of the second coming is not going to get more than, you know, like 50 seconds. You know, you got things like that going on, and you're like, whoa, you know, how do we approach that?
Or
I
a
mean, how do you
dozen words
digest
in
it?
a 500-word story.
That's right, and it's difficult, but the challenge is there, especially for those of us who, you know, are people of goodwill toward each other. You know, I want to understand the way most Muslims understand. Now, unless I understand that, then I'm not going to be able to understand why some are going off and doing things that don't even seem to be in line with their own set of beliefs.
Exactly.
So that's why it becomes very important, again, shows like this, what you're doing out at Southern, you know, for us to continue to try to broaden people's understandings.
Yeah.
You know, and that's part of the challenge, I think, for both higher ed, you know, for those of us who, you know, even have a tradition.
Sure.
You know, how do I get my own people to want to care about this stuff and study it? You know, from you know the Catholics. You know, it's just like I will say when I first came, I did teach you know a stripped down version of world religions in the parish for a while, and maybe I need to go back and do that again.
Yeah.
I do know that there's some of the folks here in the community that get together and do some interreligious dialogue, and that is also really important. But you know, what can we do to make the world a better place? How do we do that? You know, and that's the challenge.
Well, I'll take my example. I was a farm kid from Carl Junction. I probably really never traveled beyond a 100-mile radius of that farm until I was 18 and had the opportunity to have some freedom. And so what we're trying to do is get those students when they're in college, 18, 19, 20, maybe a little older, and give them opportunities to broaden their perspective and get off the farm and see that there's a lot going on in the world that didn't happen in their sphere of influence as a young person. And again, they come back different people.
And you know, what was going on the farm was great stuff.
Oh, sure.
Nobody needs to,
A great formative experience.
Exactly.
But not a cumulative experience.
Well, and not the whole picture.
Oh gosh.
You know, I mean, I've lived my entire life in the state of Missouri, and and so that means that my experience is limited.
That's right.
You know, except when I've pushed myself to broaden that scope beyond there, and I've liked it when I've pushed myself to expand beyond there.
Right.
Because it's taught me a lot.
Well, and expanding your horizon with music and food is sometimes easier than religion.
Right.
Kudos to that Japanese student that took the step and said, I'm just going to go sit and listen and learn.
I think he might have come for the food, but
well,
it's okay.
And food is a great motivator. But food and music are easy.
Yeah.
Religion, that's really pushing you to explore your own boundaries.
Yeah, and I think it's important for all of us. And again, one of the reasons why we do this show, that we need to look at where we come from. So my guest this morning is Dr. Brad Hodson, who's the Executive Vice President at Missouri Southern State University. We've been talking a little bit about what can a university and what do we as people in this community need to do to broaden our horizons, about how we look at religion and faith and those things. So we are going to be right back after a quick break. This is Faith in Our Hometown. Don't go away.
You're watching Faith in Our Hometown on KSN TV, brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.
Okay, Brad Hodson from Missouri Southern State University. We've been talking about how we can broaden our community's horizons, and one of the ways is to get people to go on to the university campus. One of the ways is for us to do some actual education in terms of coursework and things like that. What can we do for the broader population? What are we going to do for the ones who won't get onto campus, won't come to any of the the experiences that we got, and who won't necessarily and not that I want them to get out of their own church thing, but
right.
Just how do we broaden those horizons?
Well, it's interesting. You had a gentleman on who was the pastor of a church on Mount Hope.
Last week, right?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And watching that show and listening to him, I sort of want to go and sit in and listen and experience that a cappella environment, which
right.
in the Catholic Church sometimes you don't have the opportunity to see. And so Again, what are we creating opportunities for folks to step outside their comfort zone, and we all get really comfortable. I mean, we sit in the same pew every week, and it's very reassuring. True. It is true. It's very reassuring. It's very comfortable, and sometimes it'd be nice just to say, this week we're going to do something different, and we're going to go to the Church of Christ, or we're going to go to a synagogue, and again, expose ourselves to those opportunities. I think there are opportunities for the university to create programs that aren't necessarily based on campus. We always want to bring them to campus, come out. It's just our natural default position, come to campus. But why not have a program where maybe we put together a study group that visited area churches and had a faculty member that led it, and maybe it was an ongoing conversation about different religions, and I think that'd be a lot of fun. I'd sign up for that in a heartbeat.
Yeah. I do think, that was one of the things I would get my students to do, is they always would have to attend, well, they always had options. I try to give them 47 different options for papers and assignments and stuff like that. But one was to attend a worship service of a tradition other than yours. Now, I would say that if one of them were Baptist and, they were General Baptist and wanted to go to a Southern Baptist, I'd say, okay, that's not probably
You're not pushing yourself.
Let's stretch a little bit more than that. But, maybe if they were Baptist, to go to a Pentecostal service.
Sure.
Or if they were Pentecostal, to go to a Catholic service, or an Episcopal service or Lutheran service, because they're a little more high churchy.
Right.
Okay. To go to Friday prayers at the Islamic Center, or to go to a synagogue service. To do those things, just to, again, and not to go in with the mindset of, okay, now I'm going to judge whether they're right or they're wrong. No. That's not the whole point to this. I don't want anybody, I'm not here to mess with anybody's faith background or to push anybody to believe differently. That you do on your own time. This is simply about understanding. Or as my guest last week was saying, this is about, well, where can we align?
Right.
What can we agree on? How can we work forward together? How can we be people of goodwill, linking up arms and making Joplin a better place?
Well, and how culturally did we get to the point where we try to gerrymander ourselves? This is what I believe, and I'm going to take a little bit here and a little bit there, and we try to create this unique distinction that, again, feels comfortable and right to us, but doesn't help the broader community, doesn't help us grow intellectually or religiously, spiritually. We just sort of like to build these little fences around what we believe and stake our claim and say this is it for us. And I think that's stifling intellectually. You do need to push yourself. I had the opportunity to attend a wedding in a Lutheran church. Had never been in a Lutheran church. Well, as a Catholic, it was not that big of a jump.
No,
it's very familiar and very similar, and a lot of the same traditions and the service elements. And so I had no idea. Now, it'd be fun to go back, but I want to see what else is out there that I don't know about.
And again, I think, and now I'm making a big jump here, but I think that most of the pastors in our area, certainly all the ones we've had on the show, would be always open, and most of the congregations would be open to having guests.
Oh,
if you just show up and say, look, I'm from such and such, but I'll make that invitation on the air, and and just our college church, and just say, do you all take guests? And we're coming this Sunday, and and could maybe somebody from the congregation spend 5 minutes with us beforehand or afterward to just explain a little bit about what you're going to experience or what's going to go on. I think that's a great idea.
It'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Just to kind of get out of to do some of those things, to get out of our own, ways of looking at things. Sometimes it's just healthy to wait to see somebody else sees the world. And again, this is not to try to get anybody to convert to my particular way or your particular way, but just simply a way of saying, go see how somebody else experiences the world. And as I would always tell my students, go see how somebody else defines God. Go see how somebody else tries to connect with that God. Go see how somebody else tries to worship that God. And then, just step back from it and go, oh, what did I see?
And how does that inform how that person interacts with me and their basis of understanding issues and people? Well, in Joplin, when I came here, everybody said, what color are you? We have the color code.
Oh, yeah, color code, sure.
Are you a red, a yellow, a white? Well, that is designed to help you understand how to interact and work collaboratively with different people. Well, the same thing is true religiously. These labels sometimes are, again, stifling to us. If we could just understand why Bob views the world a certain way, well, Bob is Pentecostal, or Bob is Jewish, or Bob is a member of Islam, and that helps you understand how he approaches things from a faith perspective.
Yeah, and again, we don't have a lot of those. Now, we're more used to this at the university, but even outside of the, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, the Western, triad. I mean, we deal with students who are Shinto, Buddhist, Hindu, those kinds of things. I've had a very interesting experience the last number of years because my associate here, Father Joji, is from India. Now, he's from a very Catholic area of India, but he grew up in a culture where the predominant, religion was Hinduism.
Right.
And again, Hinduism is such a huge variety of responses to life and faith that go everything from a philosophical, intellectual to something that looks very much like devotional,
Sure.
God worship, and it just depends on who you're going to encounter.
Well, and creating a depth of understanding of Hinduism that goes beyond the cow thing.
Yeah,
There's
exactly.
so much more to it, and we latch onto those little things that sometimes aren't as meaningful as understanding the depth of why they revere certain animals
and
or
right, exactly.
creatures. But if you ask 90 people or 100 people what they think of Hinduism, they'll say, well, they're the cow people. Well, it's so much more than that if you just take the time to understand it.
And it is tricky sometimes to understand those things. I mean, really, I remember when I first started teaching world religions, I was like, I really hadn't studied it,
Right.
except when I was in college, and hadn't studied it for a long, long time. I mean, I'm barely an expert in Catholicism, much less
I don't know
an
about
expert
that.
in world religions. But I mean, when I went back to my study and had to do those things, my favorite thing always was dealing with the students who practiced that particular religion, and it was always fun having them in class. So I'll never forget the first time I had Hindu students in my class, and I said, "Am I sounding like I'm talking about what's familiar to you?" Because until you ask somebody who practices
Exactly.
something, you don't even know whether or not your take on it is a good thing. Now, I must say I got good marks from my students who
Good.
were Hindu and Buddhist and Islam, and I got, and it was good because after a while I began to feel a whole lot more comfortable because they gave me the feedback.
Right.
They gave me the feedback that said yes, and I'd say, well, why don't you talk about, so what kind of Hindu
I was
are
gonna
you?
ask if you
Why
let
don't
them
you
talk.
talk about? Why don't
Yeah.
you talk about what your experience is? Or and it was always great because when they would start teaching each other, first of all, it took the pressure off me, but second of all, they can speak to it in a completely different way.
Oh, sure.
Because it's theirs.
Yeah. And what a rich learning environment to allow the students to become the teachers and the passion they bring to it. You could never replicate.
No, you can't.
Yeah.
And again, that's one of the reasons I love higher ed is
Yeah.
because, where else can I, where can I get that? I mean, I'm really sorry. There's not going to be many Hindu students who come to Macaulay
Sure.
High School, so I can't get them to do it there, but I can get them to do it at that college level when they start coming in from all those different places and all those different backgrounds
That
and get the
is
richness to be able to share that.
The beautiful thing about higher education is that melting pot of ideas where there is so much available if you'll just take advantage of it. It's laying right there in front of you, and when you're a student or a faculty member or staff member, you just have a smorgasbord of opportunities, but it's pushing yourself out. Take that first step, go to a class, go to a meeting, go to an event, and learn something. It's almost criminal if you don't take advantage of it.
Right. And again, how do we expand that for our viewership? How do we expand that for folks who get up on a Sunday morning, and I'm still amazed that you're watching the show, but who get up on a Sunday morning and watch,
Right.
something like this? Because sometimes, I met somebody in the grocery store that just said, the other day, I have to laugh. This is a great story. Somebody sees me in the grocery store. It's like 11 o'clock, on a Saturday night or whatever, and I'm in the grocery store, doing my thing. He comes up to me and says, "Hey, I just wanted you to know I watch your show, and so if you're watching, thanks." But he just said, "I watch your show," and I said, "What do you like about the show?" And he says, I think it's cool with all the different things you talk about, and and then I just said, "And it's just really, and you're nice to people."
There you go.
And I'm like, oh gosh, yeah, I guess being nice to people sometimes is an important thing.
It would be a totally different show if you came on every Sunday morning and said, this is the area of Catholicism we're going to cover this morning.
Well, I wouldn't have any viewership.
But you'd have a different viewership. But you come on and say, I want to talk about something that really has nothing to do with Catholicism as a subject,
Right.
but is a broad topic, and maybe it will intrigue someone to go out and learn more and take that first step. Maybe viewership of your show is the entry point for folks interested in broadening their religious views.
Well, I'm going to make a challenge this morning to some of our area pastors. Just like we were talking about earlier, I hope that everybody out there could actually just, if you receive a phone call this week from anybody that just says, I drive by your church all the time, I don't know anything about it, and they call and say, are you open to having guests? My challenge to you would be, invite them in, not necessarily with the purpose of converting them, but just invite them in with the possibility of just sharing who you are and just let them see you at your best in your own environment, doing what you do. And I think that could be a tremendous learning experience for us around the greater Joplin area. I think that would be a wonderful, wonderful thing. And I didn't even think about that before we started talking about this morning.
It started here.
So yeah, but I think that would be great. That would be my challenge to all the other pastors out there in the area to do something like that. Well, my guest this morning has been Dr. Brad Hodson, who's the Executive Vice President out at Missouri Southern. We've been talking about the international mission of the university and how we might continue to educate the broader community. We're going to be right back after this Mercy Minute. Hope you'll stay tuned. So we'll be right back in just a moment.
Find out how a Mercy doctor can take care of you. At Mercy, your life is our life's work. Quality, safety, and an exceptional patient experience. Mercy is grateful to be recognized as one of the top 15 health systems in the United States. At Mercy, your life is our life's work.
Well, thank you for joining us this morning for Faith in Our Hometown. We've been talking about the International Mission of Missouri Southern and how do we take that off the campus, because we know how we do it on the campus, but how do we take it off the campus to try to, make the international mission part of the mission of our community here in Joplin, because I really think that that's probably one of the things that we would be smart as a community if we did. So as we've been talking about that, we issued the challenge a little bit this morning to churches to be open to phone calls about how someone might be open to coming to your church and to doing those things. I would hope that anytime you get a chance to maybe read a book, visit with somebody, if you see somebody who you don't know and you get a chance to talk a little bit about religion and what other people believe, take the opportunity. Just broaden that horizon. Get a chance to go, if you're lucky enough and blessed enough to be able to go travel, go do it and go see how some of those things look. I'm still waiting to visit some countries, to visit some of the things I've studied about. But join us next week for Faith in Our Hometown. We're glad that you joined us this morning, and we hope that you continue to broaden your horizon.
Thanks for watching. Faith in Our Hometown can be seen Sunday mornings at 6:30 and 9 a.m. on KSN. Brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.